Hi everyone, welcome to TSAM Digital. My name's Amy and today I'm joined by Jessica Attard, who is the Programme Director for Health and Social Programmes at ShareAction. So welcome Jessica, great to have you.
Hi, Amy. Thanks for having me.
You're welcome. So today, obviously, we're going to be talking a bit about your work, and it's an area that we don't often talk about when it comes to health and social programmes. But just first to kind of set the scene, in case people aren't familiar with ShareAction, could you tell us a little bit about the organisation and its mission?
Yeah, absolutely. Um, ShareAction is a responsible investment NGO, and what that means is we work with investors, asset owners, and asset managers all over the world, and we both work to hold those investors to account for their impact on people and planet. But we also work with investors to drive greater corporate responsibility and disclosures.
Fantastic. So when it comes to corporate responsibility and we look at the ESG context, I think we often generalize with the term ESG. There's a lot of greenwashing and there's a lot of just kind of focusing on the environmental and climate change side, especially recently with all the heat waves and things. But like you say, health and social is a big part of this. So could you tell us a little bit about what you do in your role and what you're doing when it comes to corporate responsibility?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a dietitian by background, originally trained as a dietitian, and have worked across the health system at a local and a national level, as well as with a number of health-focused NGOs and foundations. And I guess the common thread throughout my career has been about working across different sectors, developing partnerships and collaborating for social impact. And so that really led me to ShareAction, because I felt that this was the place that I could have greatest impact on health and social issues. And as you set out there, the social pillar within ESG is typically kind of less well defined, less well prioritized by investors. But don't mistake that for it being less important. We often hear from investors that they don't focus on social issues as much because the link to financial materiality can be less clear. But we've seen, particularly recently, lots of examples which really do demonstrate how financially material social issues can be. So one example is the alleged labour rights abuses at Boohoo, which wiped £1 billion off Boohoo's value. Another example, which is a little more recent, was Kellogg's coming out publicly and challenging the UK's new public health regulations, which are aimed at limiting the sale and marketing of less healthy products. And Kellogg's actually said that they've done some modelling and these regulations would mean that they lose £113 million a year in sales. And so these social issues and the extent to which companies are really considering health and social issues in their work is incredibly important.
That's good. And I know it's not good for these companies to sort of have these kind of public relations crises on their hands, but at least, as you say, if it can prove that there is some kind of financial materiality around these issues, it should hopefully motivate firms to get more involved with them, for their balance sheets. But looking beyond just, financial materiality, if investors want to actually have a positive social impact, what are the kind of motivations and on the ground positive impacts that can be brought about by investing in healthy diets and sustainable lifestyles? Because obviously, for people, whether it's institutional clients or private clients who want to invest in a better future, what kind of positive outcomes can they see specifically that help people?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's right. This is a financially material issue. The pandemic has made that absolutely clear, that link between health and economic prosperity. But it's also an issue of consciousness. So it's really important to support people to stay healthy, to support people to thrive and stay well, and to work towards a more equal and prosperous society. And so investors should be thinking about these things regardless of that financial materiality argument. And I guess just sort of taking this back to basics, investors have a duty to maximize their returns, to do what's in the best interests of their clients, their beneficiaries, and they're also operating in a really highly competitive market. So we would say that investors not only should care about health and social issues, but also have an obligation to consider health within their approach, because it's a financially material issue, because it's in the best interests of their beneficiaries. And we do firmly believe that managers seem to be reacting and adequately incorporating health into their thinking will have a competitive advantage. But I think it's worth kind of setting out, when we're talking about health, this is generally quite a poorly understood area. And so when we talk about health, what we're really talking about is this idea that health is shaped by our environment. So the places we live, the jobs that we do, and the air that we breathe, all of these things shape our health. And companies have an outsized influence on these things. And so as owners of these companies, investors have a powerful influence on their policies, on their practices, and are able to drive accelerated improvement. And we've seen that through our work on nutrition and when we've worked with investors to influence the food system. So we know that that change is possible, and that investors can be really instrumental in driving accelerated progress. I think it's probably worth saying that at the moment, the system around us is fundamentally stacked against us. So we're consistently encouraged to consume more of the less healthy products, and those who are least well off in society and at greatest risk of poor health are often most exposed to the drivers of ill health. So take poor air quality as an example, or fast food outlets. So we're operating at the moment in an unsustainable status quo, where health costs are soaring, where life expectancy is beginning to decline in some of the world's wealthiest countries, and where chronic illness is fueling a shortage in workers within the labour market. So companies are contributing to poor health. Poor health is their externality, if you like, and we're increasingly seeing governments kind of cracking down at source. Greater regulation of companies coming into play all over the world.
That's very true. And like you say, I think we often think about the more obvious things like labour rights breaches and those kind of big scandals that are in the news a lot. But SDGs cover everything, from obvious signs of health like impoverished countries, but also kind of health in a day-to-day, in developed countries. There are all kinds of issues: air pollution, the quality of air in London and big cities. So I think there are so many ways that companies can get involved with health and not even realise it, even when they're motivated by environmental factors. I think there is potential for greenwashing there, because sometimes they see all the SDGs and they think, I can tick the box with that by claiming that, like Bruno Maradei, who is head of responsible investment at Aegon, made a good point that, a yogurt company could, say that they're contributing to healthy diets just because they sell yogurt. They might not have an initiative, but they sell food to people. So they're feeding people on a basic level. Whereas if they were doing subsidized yogurts to, poor people, that would be a good initiative that would actually contribute to the food system and kind of creating more equality. So I think how companies get involved, it's more about the process, rather than just ticking that box. But there are so many ways to get involved with health. So on that note, then, yeah, no, I know, because it's one of those things, isn't it? The more you get into it, the more you realise there are so many opportunities that aren't capitalised on, that companies can do to not only help from a financially material point of view, but to actually do some good in the world. But looking at what this looks like on the ground then, so can you tell us a little bit more about the corporate initiatives and how those investors and asset managers are getting involved with this, and what your work is involving?
Yeah, absolutely. So the really good news is that we're seeing kind of huge momentum building in this space in relation to health and responsible investing. So in response to this, we've recently established a new investor initiative called the Long-Term Investors in People's Health Programme. That will be formally launched in the autumn, but we've been busy working away and engaging investors in the new programme in the build-up to that autumn launch. And really the programme focuses on establishing health as a responsible investment theme and supporting investors to give it greater priority within that work. So we'll be doing things like providing investors with insights, analysis, engagement opportunities, facilitating dialogue with companies and supporting investors to learn from one another, because we know that lots of investors are really interested in this space, see a real opportunity, but need help to practically know how they can improve their impact on people's health. So we'll be doing that, and that programme, Long-Term Investors in People's Health, will build on our work and incorporate our Healthy Markets initiative. So this is an initiative that we've been running for the last 3 years, and as I mentioned earlier, it's all about working with large investors to influence the food industry, and really with the aim of improving and supporting consumers to stay as healthy as possible. And we've seen real success over the last 3 years, moving from a food industry that really was not disclosing at all what proportion of their sales were coming from less healthy products, to one where actually the majority now of particularly retailers are making that disclosure. And not only are they disclosing where they're currently at, but they're also setting ambitious targets to grow the proportion of healthier sales over time. And that will help to mitigate future risks from incoming regulation that we're seeing in that Kellogg's example. And so we work with a whole range of investors, both asset owners and asset managers. In the Healthy Markets Coalition, we currently have almost $7 trillion worth of assets under management, so investors representing that. But we have investors of all shapes and sizes and from a range of different geographies. So we've got Robeco, Rathbone and Greenbank, Nest, Legal & General, Hermes, so a real range of investors taking different approaches. But what we ask of our investors is that all of them are willing to engage and are committed to making progress on health.
That's great. I mean, it's great to see that this interest is growing, as you say. And so in terms of why this momentum is growing, do you think that maybe people switching to vegan diets and the kind of consumer demand for sort of healthier products and non-alcoholic beverages, all of these things that, we've seen lifestyle changes after the pandemic, people kind of getting back into health and wellness, and there's kind of a big brand around those are the buzzwords really. Do you think that's kind of helped propel the market industry?
I think it has. So I think there's a whole range of reasons why health is getting more prominence at the moment. And I think one is, of course, we're in the midst of a global pandemic. The impact, the huge and enduring impact that has had on the economy, on businesses, on sectors, is so clear to see. And so I think that's really kind of put the spotlight on health as a material issue and as a responsible investment theme that has historically been very overlooked. So I think that has really helped to, as you say, sort of propel interest in this area. There is also that thing that I mentioned around growing regulation in this space. So we now see more sugar taxes than carbon taxes all around the world. Just in the UK, there are, for example, policies and regulations that mean fast food outlets can no longer open up within 400 metres of a school within London. So that means if you're KFC or McDonald's, you're now faced with this challenge of how do you continue to grow your revenue when you can't build any new buildings, because being within 400 metres of a school within London basically excludes the whole of London. And so these are having real big impacts on kind of business models and businesses needing to think really creatively. But as you say, there is also that kind of pull. So there's also the consumer demand for lower alcohol beverages and for healthier plant-based foods, as you mentioned. And so there's real potential not only to mitigate risk by incorporating health considerations into investors' work, but also to realise real kind of upside opportunity by investing in innovation, by investing in those new products and companies who are offering and able to meet that kind of consumer demand.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting to see how this pans out, and hopefully there'll be more discussion around this. We hopefully will include more on this channel and look at it at our conferences, because long term, as the ESG conferences grow to other regions, it would be nice for us to look at the sources of healthy diets, looking at sustainable food value chains and looking at where they come from, as well as the end user, as you say, consumer, when it's being promoted at the brand level. So really, really interesting insight today. So I think that's all we've got time for, but thanks so much for joining us. It's been great hearing about your work and what ShareAction's doing.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks for having me.
And thanks everyone for watching.